Hi everyone, welcome to JavaTechie. Microservices are more popular nowadays and maximum company following this microservice pattern to build their enterprise application. Being a developer, if you mention microservice in your resume, then you will get the first question from the interviewer, how do you handle security in microservice architecture, isn't it? So in this tutorial, we'll demonstrate how to implement JWT based security in microservices using Spring Cloud Gateway. Okay, alright. So before I go next, I am assuming that you guys have basic knowledge on microservice architecture with each and every components, and you have also knowledge on the Spring security using JWT. If not, then this tutorial might not help for you because I am not going to cover other components of microservices here. I will only focus on security implementation, but don't worry, already I have covered this concept and you can find them in my YouTube channel. So if you will search JavaTechie, the recent video I have uploaded on Spring security using JWT, and if you will go to the JavaTechie any playlist, you can find something called microservices. Okay, so you should understand this microservice playlist as well as this particular JWT implementation video to grab the security implementation in gateway concept. Okay, don't worry, I'll share the link in video description so that you guys can check that out. Fine. So without any further delay, let's get started. So before we directly jump into the implementation, let me walk you through what all microservices components we need to design for this flow. Okay. So let's assume we have two microservices, Swiggy service and restaurant service, and they both are communicating with each other. Okay. Next, we register these two services as a client in Eureka service registry so that load balancing and service call will be quite easy between the microservices, right? Also, we restricted user to not directly access to the microservices, so we have defined API gateway which will helps to route the request to corresponding microservices. For example, if user will pass /swiggy/app, then gateway will route that request to the Swiggy service. Similarly, if user will pass /restaurant, then gateway will redirect that request to the restaurant service. Okay, this is what typical microservices flow, and I believe everyone have this basic understanding. If we all are in the same page, then let's move to the next step. Assume that you got a requirement to secure your microservices. How will you do that? It's very simple, right? I can write the security implementation in two different services. I can write in the Swiggy services. I can also write the security implementation in my restaurant services. But what if I have 100 of microservices? Then writing the same security implementation in each and every microservices is not a good practice. Rather, we do in each and every microservices, we can ask someone to do on behalf of us, right? Or we can ask someone to do that. Then who is that person or who is that component? That is API gateway. Okay. Since we understand API gateway will intercept each and every request coming to my microservices, then why can't we ask to the gateway, hey API gateway, once you receive any request, please authenticate that request. If it is a valid, then please send it to me, otherwise give error to the user. That makes sense, right? We can absolutely write our security specific implementation in API gateway. But again, this is not a good practice because gateway is meant for routing the request. So let's not combine routing and security logic in one place. Then how we can segregate it? Let's follow the best practice and create another microservice who will hold all my security related stuff. So let's create another service called authentication service, or you can name it as a identity service and register that as a client in your Eureka. Next, define few endpoint like register a new user, generate a JWT token, and validate the token using JWT implementation. Now, user before accessing any endpoint, first he need to get the token from auth service. once user have token, then he can happily access any endpoint with that specific token. For example, let's say user try to access the Swiggy app. So he given the URL. So he send the request to API gateway with JWT token what he received from authentication service. Okay. Once API gateway receive the request, first API gateway will validate whether user passed the token as part of header or not. If yes, then he will ask authentication service to validate that token. If token is valid or if user is authenticated successfully, then gateway will redirect that request to the Swiggy app service. Okay. Same way, if you have 10 microservices, API gateway will intercept each and every request and authenticate them before request delegate to the corresponding microservices. Okay. So this is what the typical security implementation in the microservices architecture. Okay. So I hope this workflow is clear for you. Let's begin with the implementation. So as per the workflow, we understand we need to create 4 component, 2 microservices and then one gateway and one service registry. Okay. So already I created these 4 component for you, and the rest thing we need to do, we need to create the authentication service, and we'll demonstrate how each and every request coming to the API gateway can be integrated to the auth service to authenticate that request. Okay. This is what the steps I will show you. But before that, I just want to give you the heads up about the 2 microservices what I have been created. Okay. So if you'll go to the IntelliJ IDEA, you can see I have 2 application, Swiggy app, restaurant service. These 2 are the microservices, and Swiggy service registry, which is nothing the Eureka service registry. And then I have created Swiggy gateway. Okay. So if you'll go to the Swiggy app, if you'll go to the, let me open the project of it. Let's say I will go to the Swiggy app controller. Okay. So if you observe here, user will give the order ID to the Swiggy app. Then Swiggy app will check the restaurant service. So if you observe here, I have created a client class, and there I am just doing the REST API call to the restaurant service. So I have given the service name because I have registered both my microservice in Eureka service registry. Okay. So from Swiggy app, the request will goes to the restaurant service through the REST API call. So if you'll go and check in the restaurant service, if you'll go to its controller class, let me zoom this for you. Let me do this. If you observe here, this is what the endpoint we are exposing from the restaurant service. And if you will check the service get orders, I have hard coded few information. You can see here, right? This is the order ID and this is the corresponding order object. Similarly, I have created one map, but you can integrate any DB. Since I just want to demonstrate the security implementation, I have not used any DB in this restaurant service. So I have few hard-coded information. We'll ask user, hey, give me the order ID, I will give you the order object. That's it. Okay. That is what the endpoint I have exposed from restaurant service, and the same endpoint is being consumed from the Swiggy app. Okay. So these are the 2 microservices are communicating with each other. From Swiggy app, we are doing the REST call to the restaurant service. Okay, that's it. Now if you'll go to the service registry, I just define enable Eureka server, and if you'll go in the resource and check the application.yml, I'm telling Eureka to register this application as a server. Okay. Now if you'll go to the API gateway, this is what the main class of API gateway, and everything we have done in the configuration. Okay, if you'll open the application.yml file, I am telling to API gateway, hey, if user is giving /Swiggy as a URL, redirect that request to the Swiggy app. Okay, Swiggy app is nothing my service name what is registered in Eureka. Okay, so you can see here Swiggy app is my microservice has been registered in the Eureka with this name. Okay, so that is what I have defined here. I mean, this already I explained in my microservice playlist how to play with gateway. Just have a look. Okay, so if URL is this, then delegate request to this particular microservice. If URL is /restaurant, then delegate that request to restaurant microservices. Okay, so if you check the port of each microservice, let me show you the gateway. Gateway I have not specified anything, so it will run on port default 8080. Okay, and if you'll check the Swiggy app, go to the application.yml file, it will run on port 8081 and restaurant service should run on 8082. Let me open the application.yml file. Yeah, it's running on 8082 and my service registry is running on 8761. So all my four services running on different port. I need to access the API gateway. That is what we understand here, right? If user send request to the API gateway with /Swiggy, then that request need to redirect to the Swiggy service. We have not implement any authentication related stuff. I just want to show you the workflow. If it is working, then we'll start implementing the authentication service. Then we'll integrate that in our API gateway. So first let's verify whether application is working or not. So first let me go to the restaurant service and I will take some order ID. Okay, let's say this is the order ID. My gateway is running on port 8080. So I should always send request to gateway. Then gateway will redirect that request to the microservice. So what I will do here, I will create a new request, HTTP request, HTTP localhost 8080. I want to hit the Swiggy app, which is my microservice. So I will give the URL Swiggy / give the order ID. Okay, because if you observe, I specified Swiggy because that is what I have defined in gateway, right? If URL is coming with /Swiggy, then only redirect that request to the Swiggy app. Then from the Swiggy app, which particular endpoint you want to access, go to the Swiggy app application, and if you go to the controller, I want to access this particular endpoint. What argument it is expecting? Order ID. Just give it here. That's it. Okay, this is what the order ID, right? Now let me send the request. I am getting the response. Order ID is this, name is paneer butter masala, quantity 1, price is this, order date is this, delivered is this. Okay, now if you want to access the restaurant service from the gateway, then what URL you need to provide? If you'll go and check in the gateway, we need to provide the, this is what the URL, right? So just go to the postman and change the URL to this and access it. What is the URL we want to access from the restaurant? Let me verify. Go to the controller class. Okay, the URL is different, right? Apart from /restaurant, you need to define this URL as well. Okay, go to the postman and I will just define here this order ID I already given here. That's it. Now if you'll send the request, first let me remove one additional slash. We are getting the response. Okay, now this Swiggy service and restaurant service I am trying to access from API gateway. This is working as expected. Only the things we need to verify how we can integrate authentication part here. Okay, so the first step, all our component is ready for running. We need to start implementing the authentication service by defining these three endpoint. Okay, so I will create a new project, file, new project, click on next, specify the group ID com.JWT artifact ID, identity service. You can name it any name. Okay, you can define auth-service or identity service or security service. It is up to you. I'll change, let it be 17 since I have already installed it. Identity service, I'll name it com.JWT. So this particular identity service what I am defining will be the same application what I have done here. Okay, so I'll do it quickly because I don't want to eat more time. So I'll do it quickly, but make sure if you are getting confused, just watch this particular video. Fine. Now click on next. Now I'll add the dependency Lombok. I will add the dependency Spring Web. I will also add JPA because I want to store the user information, right? So I need this JPA and MySQL as well. MySQL. Then also I need to register this application as a client in service registry, so I need Eureka as well. Okay, Eureka client. Okay, anything I am missing here? Lombok web JPA driver, Eureka. Okay, so main thing we are missing here, I want to make this application to act as a security, right? So I need to implement this security dependency, Spring security, and rest JWT type security, JWT dependency will add manually. Now click on next, import this project. So project imported successfully. Now what we need to do, we have added the security implementation or dependency. We need to add the JWT specific dependency. Okay, so I'll just add it down. Let me do the Maven update. Then meanwhile I will create couple of packages. So I will create, don't suggest this plugin, that's fine. I'll create a package called entity. Then I'll create a package repository. Then I will create package called service. Then controller. Then I will create config. Okay, fine. So next quickly create the entity and repository. Then we'll define three different endpoint. I mean create a user, generate a token using JWT, and also validate the token. Okay, first let me create an entity, new Java class. I'll name it user info, or we'll give some valid name. We can specify user credential. Okay, and we'll define few field, ID, name, email, and password. Since this is my entity, I need to define entity, and I no need to define at the table. I need to define this as my primary key. I need to define generate value, I mean auto generated value, strategy, identity. Let me zoom this for you. Fine. Also I need to define the getter and setter, so I'll use Lombok data. I need all argument constructor, I need no argument constructor. That's it. Now since we have created the entity repo using the JPA, first I need to configure the data source. I can configure in my application.properties file. Okay, so let me take this up. I don't want to define any port at this time. We'll define, either you can define here or you can go in the YML file, but we'll decide it later. Now we'll quickly create the repository. New Java class. We'll name it, I mean it will be interface. We'll name it user credential repository. Okay, extends it from JPA repo. Now define T is nothing, your user credential class, and data type of your primary key, which is nothing, integer, right? That's it. Let me zoom this. This is what my JPA repo. So we created entity, we created repo. Now I'll create a service. New Java class. I'll name it authentication service. Okay, auth service. We need to define @service here. Then I need to inject the repository here, private. What is the repository name? We have defined user credential repository. Inject using auto add. Fine. Now I will write a method to save the user first. Once user is there in my DB, then only I can authenticate. I can generate the token using that user details and I can authenticate it, right? So I need to write a method public void, or you can return something string save user or add user. Give the object which is nothing, the user credential. Fine. So you can use the repository dot save this particular object. and I will just return some string value, return user added to the system. Fine. But if you observe in the user credential, what field we have? ID, name, email and password. So in authentication service, we are storing the user with string password, which is not a recommended way. So what we can do? We need to define the password encoder. So I'll create a config class, new Java class. I'll name it auth config. I need to define @configuration. Then I need to define the bean of public password encoder. There is some class bcrypt password encoder. Okay, and I need to define this @bean. So one thing you need to understand, this is the config class where we can tell to the Spring Boot app what API need to be authenticated or what could be bypassed. I will come to that point. We need to configure that, but let's not get confused at this time. So we need this bean. Okay, now I will inject this in my service private password encoder use auto add. Fine. Now before you save it, what you can do, credential dot set password, take the password encoder dot encode the password, get it from the credential and set it. Okay, now this is how the password will be encrypted in DB. That's fine. Now we need to write a method. See here, if you understand it correctly, we need to write a method to register the user. Then also we need to write the method to get a JWT token and validate that token. So for that, to generate a token and to validate a token, I can write a util class or I can write a service class. New Java class, I will name it JWT service. Okay, better I will make it small. Now here you need to write all your logic, or you can create a util class as well. Okay, so I'll define this as a service. Now here you need to use the library from JWT and you need to write the code. Since already I tried it many times, let me copy paste and I will explain. Let me paste it here. Fine. Okay. See here, there is no rocket science. We have defined the secret of 32-bit. This is what you can generate. I have already explained in this particular tutorial how you can generate the secret. Just have a look. And I have defined the same. Then I have defined a method to generate a token. This will call the create token method to create a token. Okay. So what it contains as part of the token? Claims. Claims is nothing, your header, payload and signature, whatever you are given from the input. Okay, and set subject is nothing, your username, when the token is issued, that timestamp, and what is the expiration limit, that is what the timestamp, and which type of algorithm you are using to encrypt your token. This is what the algorithm. Okay, so this is the predefined methods given by the JWT's parser, so you can use that. And create token and validate token, I have defined two methods, so you can make it void. We don't want to return anything, let's make it void only. After validate, we don't want to do anything. Okay, so you can do like this. Fine. So if you understand, we have defined register method, we have defined generate the token method, we have defined validate the token method. Fine. So what I'll do, I'll go to the service class auth service. I'll write a method here to generate and validate the token. So I can use private, then I can inject it JWT service, or I'll name it JWT service, which makes sense. Inject using auto add. Fine. Now I will define a method, public string generate token. So this should be T small. So to generate the token, you need to give username. That's it, right? I can call return JWT service generate token. I can give this username. Let me go to this generate token. Yeah, generate token will internally call the create token. That's fine. I mean, you can keep in a same method, but let's follow the proper coding standard. Now in the auth service, I have written this. Now I will also write another method to validate a token. Public void validate token. Give him the token to validate. I will simply call JWT service dot validate token. Give the token. Fine. I have defined these three methods in my auth service or identity service. Now what next? I need to call these three methods from my controller class. So what I'll do, I'll just define new Java class. I'll name it auth controller. I'll zoom this. I need to annotate here at the rest controller. Then I need to define request mapping. I mean the root URL, that is /auth. I mean you can define anything, okay? Now you need to inject your service, private auth service, inject using auto add. Now the next step, you need to call all the three methods. These are the three methods. Generate the token, validate the token, and register a user. So just go to the IntelliJ IDEA, define public string add new user, give him the object user credential object, or you can name it user. Okay, let's not confuse. We'll give user as a variable name, and we'll call return service dot save user and give this user object. Then you need to annotate this at the rate request body, and you need to define here at the rate post mapping. You can define the URL /register. Now I will write another method, public, who will give me the token string get token. This should be small. How he can get the token? By giving the username. So what I'll do, either you can create a new class or you can use the same class to pass the token username. I'll use the same class, user credential, return service dot generate token, give the username from this user credential dot get username. Okay, that's it. You need to define this at the rate get mapping, and you can define token. Fine. Next, we'll write a method to validate a token. So I'll just copy this and we'll just change the name. Validate token. So change the URL, and you need to pass the token here, right? String token. So you can pass any way. You can use the request param or you can use the path variable. It is up to you. I will use the request param. Okay. Now you need to call the service dot validate token, give the token, but it won't return anything, just remove it. You can return something, okay? If there is no exception, you will get some message. Token is valid. If exception, you will get the error, right? I mean, if this validate token will having not correct value, you will get the exception. If it is correct, then you will get this string as a response back. So we have defined these three methods. Since you know we have implemented the Spring security using the JWT. Spring security by default enable every endpoint to pass the username and password to access this particular endpoint. Now if I'll run this application and if I'll try hitting the slash register or slash token, I'll get the error because Spring security will force me to give the authentication information for each and every endpoint what you have defined. I need to bypass those things. So what I can do? Very simple. Go to your config, define first this as a web security something, enable web security. Next, you need to define the security filter chain. Okay, so I have already explained. Let me add it. So you can define like this. Security filter chain. This is the Spring Boot 3.0 changes. And here I am telling if request is coming with slash auth slash register or slash auth slash token or slash auth slash validate. Let me verify whether the value is correct or not. This is the validate, this is the token, and this is the register. Okay, go to the config. If URL is coming with these three URL, then permit all the requests. Don't force them to authenticate. Okay, but if I will force it to authenticate, no one can able to access this endpoint, right? So that is the reason I must need to bypass these three call. Fine. Now we are all good, right? We have defined the controller to register a new user, to get a token, and to validate the token. Now anyone can hit this particular endpoint. Okay, let me show you. Then we'll understand further. So what I'll do, I can register this as a Eureka client. Okay, we need to do that. Otherwise, we can comment out the Eureka related stuff and we can test this flow. But since this is the application we want to register in a Eureka service registry, let's do that. What steps you need to follow? You need to define enable discovery client, right? Enable discovery client, and next you need to define the where is your Eureka up and running. So go to the resource, create a file, new file, application.yml. Okay. Now let me define the application name, Spring application name. This I will register as a identity service. Next, I can define the Eureka client where is my server is up and running, and also I can define the port. Let me define the port, server dot port. We can define, let's say, 9090 or some different. Okay, 9898. Fine. Now we register this application as a client and we have defined all the three required method we understand in the flow. Now first let's test it, then we'll find out the problem and we'll fix it. So let me go to the main class. I'll just run it. If you observe, currently we have these three applications registered, right? Restaurant service, Swiggy app, and Swiggy gateway. Now once I started my authentication or identity service and I register that as a client, in few seconds once the application will be up, you can find that service name here. So let's verify if it is up and running. Yeah, it's up and running on port 9898. Now go to the browser, just refresh this. Can you see here the identity service is registered as a client in Eureka? That's fine. That's not our intention to check. What we want to do, we want to verify this endpoint. We'll register some user, we'll generate a token and we'll validate that. Okay. Now first let me hit this endpoint. So what is the input we have in user credential? ID will be auto generated, name, email and password I need to give. Okay. And what is the endpoint URL? Slash register. Okay. That's fine. Go to the postman. I will search for slash register. I mean, I tried it before in security example. Body. Yeah. So the URL is, what is the URL? Identity service. The URL is, let me check the console, 9898, right? Just go to the postman. 9898 auth slash register. Let's say name equal to Basant, password equal to pwd1, mail id equal to basant@gmail.com. Now let me send the request. User added to the system. Meanwhile, let me open the database. Now let me add other user. Let's say Suraj. His password is pwd2 Suraj. Let me send the request. We have added second user. Now let me add another user, Rahul. His password equal to 3 rahul@gmail.com. Now send the request. We have added 3 user, right? So if you'll go and verify in the DB, close, what is the table name we have created? User credential, right? So I'll just run select star from user credential. We have stored 3 user with encrypted password, okay, and we are able to access this endpoint because we are bypassing the call in the config class, okay. Now let's validate the or generate the token first. So what I'll do, I'll just call this method to generate the token. Go here. To generate the token, I need to pass the username, right? So I'll create another endpoint. Let me copy this. New HTTP request of type post. Then you can try the URL. Get the token. This is of type post. So what you need to pass as part of the body? Only the name, right? So you can pass the name. Let's say I will pass the name called, this can be a username. You can give the proper name of your attribute, or you can create a auth request as a DTO and you can play with it. Let's say I will give name, let's say John. Send the request. What is the problem? Let me see. So if you'll go here, okay, my bad, this should be post mapping, and we need to annotate here @request body, because we need to pass the body, right, which is user credential. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll create a DTO to make it better. I'll create a package called DTO. I'll name it new Java class auth request, okay, and then I'll define private string username and private string password. So I'll go to the entity class and I'll just copy paste the annotation of Lombok. That's it. Fine. Now here I can use the auth request. You can give a try with this entity class directly, but let's not get confused. I'll define auth request, and I can specify here auth request dot get username. Okay, that's it. This is request body post mapping. So let me restart this. So it started. Now let's go to the postman. Change the field username. Change the field password. Some password. Okay. Now I want to generate the token by giving this particular field username and password. Send the request. We are getting the token. That is correct. But do we register this user in our DB? No, right? John is not part of my database. Then we should not allow every user to get the token. Then to whom we need to allow? Only those user who is present in my system. Okay, so we need to authenticate the username and password before giving them the token. So that is what one step we need to do here. Okay, so what we can do, first we need to inject the authentication manager in the Spring Security. Private authentication, let me check the class name, authentication manager, right? Authentication manager, and you need to define @auto-add. Once you define the authentication manager, once you inject it, you need to create bean of authentication manager. So go to the config class, and here you can define a bean of authentication manager. So once authentication manager is ready with you, what you can do, the next step, go to your controller class. Here just call authentication manager. Hey authentication manager, please authenticate the request. Which type of request? New username password authentication token, and I'm giving you the username auth request dot get username, and take the password as well, auth request dot get password. You take this input username and password, authenticate it. If you found that user is present in my DB with the correct credential, okay, then give me the token back. So what I can do here, I'm telling if authenticate, this is what the variable I have defined, right? Authenticate dot is authenticated, then only give me this token. Authorize, throw the exception, throw new some exception, okay, runtime, or you can define your custom exception. User invalid access. Fine. This is how we have defined. Now authentication manager need to talk to your DB, but authentication manager can't directly talk to your DB, so he needs someone's help. That guy is your user detail service. So by writing this step won't help for authenticating a user. You need to define your user details class who will connect to your DB. Okay, so what I can do, in a authentication config class, define just bean of user detail service. So let me minimize this. Public user details service, you can see here user detail service. Okay, now create your own user detail service who will connect to the DB and will give the information to the authentication provider, and authentication provider can connect back to the authentication manager. So that is how it can authenticate. Okay, so I need to create my own user detail service. So I'll name it user, or I'll name it custom user details service. So you need to create this class. Create this class. I want to create inside service, right? Or we can change here only, right? No. Okay, it's fine. Oh, here is the option to change the package. So, but anyway, it's fine, right? I can create in the config and later we can move it if required. So once you create the class, it implements from a user detail service, and it will force you to override a method to load the user by username. Okay, now here you can inject your repository, private user credential repository, inject using auto add. You can also define this as a component. Fine. Now here what you need to do, you have the username with you. Okay, by taking this username, go and check in your DB whether you have user object or not. If present, then return it back. Okay, so we'll do that step. What you can do here, you can do simply repository dot find by username. But before that, first let me check what is the field I have defined in my entity class. Go to the entity where it is. I've defined name, not username. Okay, so I need to define find by name, and I can pass this username as a field. This will return me the optional. I am expecting it to return the optional of user credential object from DB. Now we need to create this method. This is what the Spring Data GPA, right? Now once you have this information with you, once you get the user object from your DB, then you need to return it back. But the return type of this method is user details. So you need to convert your credential object to user details and then send it back. So how we can do that? So we'll simply create a class by extending from user details, and all the credential object will map to that and will return it back. Okay. So what I'll do in the config only, I will create a new Java class. I'll name it custom user details object, then extends it from or implements, right? Because I believe this is the interface. Yeah, implements from user details. So again, it will force you to override few method, override all the method, and what all field you want to bind here. I want to bind the username and password. Private string username, private string password. I don't want to specify any role at this time. So the password is nothing. You can also, since you have defined the field, you can define the constructor, and you can just map the value. So what you can pass here? User credential object. That is what I am giving. I'm getting from the DB, right? So this user credential dot get username, user credential dot get password. That's it. Okay. And rest everything you can set this as a password, this as a username, and rest everything make as a true. Okay, everything we have made as a true. That's fine. Then next we can simply map it. It's very simple step. Just go back here. You have the credential object. Give it to this custom user details class what you created, and then map it. Very simple. So what you can do, just do return. Okay, already you have it, so simply return it. I mean remove it. You have the credential object with you. Just map that object to the user details class what you created. Custom user details. Okay, once you map it, just check or else, because it will return you the optional, or else just validate and throw the exception that user not found. Okay, so you can define something like this: new user not found, exception with some message, user not found with name, the username what you are getting. Okay, you can map here username. That's it. So we have created our user details service so that authentication manager can connect directly to the user detail service. For that he need the help from authentication provider. So simply just configure the authentication provider here. Go to the auth config. I mean this each and every steps I have explained in the security video. Just have a look. I have to define this as a @bin. Then I need to define the authentication provider. So let me add it. Authentication provider. I'm giving DAO authentication provider, and I'm giving the who is my user details and type of password encoder while decrypting and authenticating. Okay, so these are the things you need to configure in your security config in your identity service, and you have already defined all the endpoint. Now we'll verify all these three endpoint. We have properly implemented the security in our identity service. Let me restart this. If you will find any error, then we'll fix it. So it won't take much time. So you can see here it started on port 9898. Go to the postman. So let's try getting the token. Okay, I'm giving John and password is this. Now if I'll send the request, what I'm getting 403, because this is not the correct user. If you'll check in the output, this should throw the user not found exception, but anyway it's fine. Now we'll try with the valid input. Let's say I'll give Basant and the pwd1 is my password. If I'll send the request, I'm getting the token. If I'll slightly do the mistake in my password, I won't get any value, because while generating the token we are authenticating the user whether the user name and password is correct or not. If correct, then only give him the token. So I'm getting the token now. Now next I can validate the token. New HTTP request 8989. The URL will be validate question mark. I mean I'm giving the request param, right? Give the token equal to this. Send the request. I am trying. What is the error? Okay, let me check the URL. Okay, it is 9898, right? So just go here, send the request, token is valid. Okay, so all the endpoint is working correctly, right? And if you can understand the flow what we discussed, we have defined these three endpoint in authentication service or identity service. That part we are good. We are done with our identity service implementation. Now next, user can access that identity service from API gateway itself, right? So what I need to do, I need to configure that identity service in API gateway first. How we can do that? The way we have configured Swiggy app and restaurant service in application.yml file. Similarly, I need to register my authentication service. So simply just copy this and just paste it here. Define this identity service, and you need to give the name. Same name you need to give what you have specified here. Copy it. Okay, now paste it here. If user is giving slash auth, then delegate that request to the identity service. Now with this particular configuration, user can directly access the identity service from API gateway. See here, if you observe here, now we are hitting directly the microservice of identity service to get the token or to validate the token. Since we registered our microservice in gateway, someone can easily call your identity service from gateway itself. Now if I'll give 8080, it should work, but we have not restarted our application, right? So we'll verify it right away. Let's go to the Swiggy gateway. We have configured it. Now let me rerun it. It will take few seconds. So you can see here it started 8080, and if you'll refresh it, all the four services is working as expected. Now user first need to register and he need to get the token from identity service directly, but will not allow user to directly call the identity service. Then how we can call? Through the gateway. So for example, whatever the URL we tried it, let's try it using the API gateway endpoint. So first let me register someone. Okay, so I will give here 8080. I want to call the identity service from API gateway. I will give somebody, let's say Kumar, or I'll give Peter. Password is PSS Peter. We are trying to access the identity API from the gateway since we registered it in the gateway, right? We configured it. Now send the request. User added to the system. We'll verify in the DB. Peter is added to the system. So we send the request to whom? API gateway. API gateway redirect that request to the authentication service. Okay, it didn't validate any token so far. That implementation we need to give, but before validate the token you need to get it first, right? So that is the reason I am telling how you can register the user and get the token from API gateway. Now go back here. I want to give this username and password to get a token. So this is what, right? Post auth token body username equal to Peter, value equal to pass. It should give me the token. We are getting the token back. Now I want to validate that token. Simply go here and just paste your token. Send the request. This is wrong because I am hitting the 9898. I need to hit 8080. Okay, that is how I am communicating through the API gateway to the corresponding microservice. Fine. So the token is valid. We have this particular token which is valid, but we don't want to do these steps manually, right? So whenever the request comes to API gateway, I want API gateway to do the validate token. First he will check whether user passed the token as part of header or not. If user pass it, then validate it. So how we can do that? So we need to implement a filter in API gateway. Once request reach to the filter, API gateway will check, okay, filter, please check whether user have passed the token or not. He passed the token, well and good. Then just do the validate token call to check whatever the token he passed is valid or not. If valid, don't cry, immediately send that request to the corresponding microservice which he want to access. That is what the very simple flow. We'll do it right away. Go to the IntelliJ IDEA. In the gateway, I need to create a filter. Okay, so I will just create a package here, new package. I'll name it filter. So then quickly create a class called JWT Auth filter, or you can name it authentication filter. Fine. Once you create this filter, let's annotate this at the component. Next, you need to extend that filter from abstract gateway filter factory given by JWT, okay, or Spring Cloud Gateway. So just extends it from abstract gateway filter factory, okay. And here you need to define the filter class and you need to define a config class. That doesn't make any sense, but you need to follow this. You need to create a class called config. So okay, I'll create it here. Public static class config. Okay, now it will force you to override a method. That is, I mean, there are multiple methods. You can use the first one where it will take the config as a argument. Fine. Now since you have the config, what you can do, you can define the constructor and you need to call the super config.class. Not this, the config what you created, okay. Okay, this should be simple dot class, right? Why I am doing this much thing. Fine. I've defined the filter and we are doing the super call to the config class. Then the main thing, what logic you need to write inside this particular method. Now what logic you need to write? So for that, make sure you should have the web flux dependency in your project. Okay, you can see here this particular web flux dependency is required because this abstract gateway will take the input in the form of web flux. So go here, take the argument, okay, exchange and chain. These are the two arguments. So here we'll write the logic. Okay, why this is giving error? Okay, we need to add the return statement. Return statement is nothing, just doing the call again to the filter. Chain dot filter, give him the exchange. That's fine. Now you need to write your actual logic here inside this particular space. So what you want to do here, you want to check first it contains the header or not. Okay, if it contains header, then you need to do the validate token call. That is a simple step you need to perform here. But before that, first you need to tell for what all endpoint you want to validate these steps, right? I want to validate only for slash restaurant slash gateway. So for what all endpoint you want to validate that. So for that, what I can do, simple step, I will create one validator class, new Java class, route validator. Okay, then I'll configure those endpoint. So simply add this. I'll just define at the rate component. I mean, this you can remove. We don't have the Swagger implementation, so no API docs. So see the servlet request, you need to import this from the reactive. If you input it from the server HTTP, it will cry. Add all the required import statement, Java util function. Better I will just do Java util star. Fine. So there is no error. I'm telling if request is coming with slash auth slash register slash auth slash token slash eureka, then ignore it. Even from API gateway also bypass these three requests. Okay, because if you observe in the presentation, we need user must pass to the token. So if you will force user to validate while getting the token, that does not make any sense. So we'll allow him to get the token. Going forward, while trying to any service, he must need to pass the token as part of the request header, and we'll authenticate that token in the API gateway. Fine. Just go to the IntelliJ IDEA. We have just defined the route validator. I need to inject this. Go to the filter, private route validator, inject using auto add. Now here first I will check the request what I am getting. If it is not part of that, then allow it to do the authentication. So how I can do that? Simple, if route or what I have defined validator, right? Validator dot is secured dot test exchange dot get request. Okay, next check here, header contains token or not. How you can do that? You can simply check if exchange dot get request dot get headers dot get, or what I can say, no, get headers, we need to check, right? If it contains key authorization, we'll see that. What is the enum authorization, something like that. Yeah, HTTP header authorization. If the header contains this, then well and good. In case if it does not contains, then simply throw the error message. So I'll simply throw new runtime exception. You can define your custom exception. Okay, missing authorization header, missing authorization header. All good, fine. If it contains, then it's fine, it will continue the flow. Now if it contains, then get that header. So I'll do string auth headers. How can I get it? Exchange dot get request not this, get request dot get headers. Simple thing. We are just checking the authorization is present or not. If it is present, get it from the header itself. Get header dot get and give the value this authorization. Okay, so I will use the same in http headers dot authorization dot get the first index. That is what my token. Okay, what is the problem here? Okay, cool. Let me format it. Next, you have the header with you. What you can do now, first you need to check if header auth header, if it is a not null, and an auth header dot contains a key called barrier. Okay, or you can see auth headers dot starts with uh, this particular keyword BEARER. If starts with this, then remove the space. So if you observe, while sending this particular token as a barrier, it will append 7 empty space. So you need to remove that first. That is what by default add from the postman. So we can't do anything on that. So I will just remove those space. Auth header, auth headers. Okay, not headers, it should be header, right? Change it. Dot substring of 7. Now this auth header, this value contains the actual token. So you have token with you. Now simply what you can do, here you can do the REST call to auth service. Very simple, right? So what you can do, either you can use the web client or REST template. So simply you can do something like this. Create a package called config, let's say app config, and you can define @configuration. Fine, then you can define private, not private, public, because you need the REST template or web client, whatever is fine for you. REST template, new REST template, right? You need to define this as a bin. Once you define this as a bin, inject it here. Private REST template, define using auto add. Now you can simply do here template dot what type of this validate token method in identity service. This is get method, right? What you need to pass, only the token field. So very simple. What you can do here, go to the gateway. You can do here get for object. What is the URL you need to provide? HTTP. You no need to provide the host and port. Since it is registered in the Eureka, you can define the service name identity-service. Then what is the URL? Go to the identity service. The URL is /validate and you need to provide the token. Go to the gateway, not here, /validate, then question mark token, and you can pass the token here. The token is nothing, your auth header, correct? And what type of response it will return? It won't return anything, right? Or it will return the string. So we just define string dot class. Okay, so this will return you the value. So you can simply, what you can do here, you can add a try catch and you can check. For example, we have already added the try, right? Just define the catch, capture the exception, then like this. You can add a log statement, or you can print, or you can create your custom error object and you can map the error response. Okay, so for now I will just print it sysout, or I will just throw runtime exception. Okay, I'll do both, throw new runtime exception. You can customize this part. Okay, how to handle the exception, it is up to you. I'm not going to explain that. So you can define some messages here. Okay, unauthorized access to application, something like that, invalid access or something I want to print. We can do like this will absolutely work, there is no problem. Why this is crying? What is the error? Expected where, man? Oh, okay, cool. Now what is the error in the app config? I need to return this, right? Fine. So the way we have implemented will absolutely work. But again, from the API gateway, we are doing the another REST call to identity service. This could leads a security breach. Someone can easily get this input from the API call if they will track the or if they will just trying to hack it, right? So it's not good. You can do it, no one can stop it. Since you know there are multiple way you can perform a same action, you can do it this way. If you could mask your token again, or if you can make it better secure, just do a REST call and do the validate token API call. Okay, if not, just add those validate token related logic in gateway itself. That is simple, right? That way you will reduce the network call, and also the way you have encrypt, similar way you are trying to decrypt in the gateway itself. So I found that is the helpful solution rather than doing a another REST call. So I'm just adding this as a comment for your reference. You can give a try. What I will do, I will create a JWT util class, and I will just write a logic to validate the token. That makes sense for me. So first step, just add the JWT dependency in your gateway. Okay, so I will just add it down. Okay, it's already there, I have added it before, that's fine. Once you have added the JWT token, just go to the JWT dependency, then just go to the identity service and just copy the logic to validate the token from JWT service. We have defined the service here, right? Better I will copy the entire class, then we will modify. Copy, because I want to see while generating the token I am using this secret to encrypt. Similarly, I need the same secret while decrypting it, right? While validating it, I need the same secret to validate. So that is the reason I don't want to mess with this code. I am taking a complete copy of it and I will paste in my gateway class. I can define a package called util and I can paste it here. I will rename the class to shift F6 JWT util. Fine. So here I need only this validate token. So for create token and all is not required for me. I can remove this. I need the sign key because I am using the same secret, and I am just write a method to validate a token. That's it. Okay. So this is what the solution I feel is good to implement. Now let's use this JWT util inside the filter to validate the token. Rather than doing the REST call, we'll use this JWT util. So what I'll do, I'll just ignore this. I'll just inject private JWT util, do the auto add. Fine. Now just call this JWT util dot validate token, give the token. Fine, all good. Now as for the flow, if you try to understand any request user send, first we'll go to the authentication filter what we have written. Once it go to the authentication filter, it will first check whether user is give the authorization header or not. If it is present, get the token, and if that token is valid, then allow him to access the endpoint or allow him to redirect the request to the corresponding microservices. Otherwise, throw the exception. Okay, this is the simple flow. Now we need to tell to the gateway, hey, please call this filter before you redirect a request to the corresponding microservices. How can I tell that? Just go to the application.yml file. Here you can tell to the gateway when you are trying to send the request to the corresponding microservices, first execute this filter, do this security related validation. If well and good, then only route that request. So you can define in YML file. So I want to secure these two microservices, restaurant and Swiggy app. So what I can do, you can define the filter. So if you type here filters, you can see here, right? In filter, you can define what is your filter name. I can define this is what the filter I want to execute before you send request to this Swiggy app. So I can give like this. Similarly, before you send request to restaurant service, execute this filter. Okay, I want that filter to be executed for these two microservices. So I have configured here. This is straightforward flow, right? Request before reach to the API gateway, it will first go to the filter. Filter will validate lot of things. I mean, it will check the header, it will validate the token. If everything okay, the request will come to the API gateway, and as per YML configuration, it will go to the corresponding microservices. That's it. That is what the simple Spring Security implementation flow in API gateway. Now we'll verify the entire flow in action. Okay, so what I will do, we have changes on identity service which is up and running. We have done the change in the gateway only, right? Just restart it. So it is up and running. Okay, so I'll verify in the Eureka dashboard all the four services up and running. Now I need to send request to the gateway to access the either Swiggy app or restaurant service. But before that, first I need to get the token. Okay, once I get the token, I can send that token as part of the header and I can verify the flow. So this is the simple what we can do. First, I will go to the API gateway. Since we already registered the user, I will directly ask to get the token for that specific user. So this is the guy, right? We have registered before, or we have also registered Basant. Password is PWD1. I am asking identity service, hey, take this credential and validate in your DB. If this username and password is correct, give me the token first. Then only using that token, I can access Swiggy app and restaurant services. Let's get the token. We are well and good. We are getting the token. Now I want to access the Swiggy app to check the order status. Okay, so if you'll check in the Swiggy app, in the controller we need to give /Swiggy/order ID. So we have tried this, right? So let me directly try this one, and I am trying it from the 8080, which is from API gateway. Now if I'll send this request, it should fail because okay, I have already given it no auth. I'm not giving any authentication and I'm trying to access the Swiggy app from the gateway. Now if I'll send the request, it is giving me error. Okay, because user have not passed the authorization header. It does not contains any token. Now we'll pass the token which we generate and we'll see whether we are getting the result or not. We're trying it from gateway. Make sure to remember the port what we are using. Now I'll send the request. We are getting the result. It means whatever the token we have passed, we are able to, my gateway is able to validate using the authentication filter before delegating that request to the Swiggy app. Similarly, if I want to use the restaurant, let's say this one I want to hit the restaurant endpoint, so that request would go to the restaurant service. Now if I'll hit the request, I'll get the error because I have not passed the authorization header. Okay, so you can customize this error message. Rather than showing the 500, you can make it 403, which could be forbidden. Okay, you can customize that, but that's not our focus. We just understand how we can integrate security in gateway. Now I will go to the authorization. I will choose the barrier token and I will pass the token which we generate using the Basant and password pwd1. If I'll send the request, I am getting the result. Now whichever microservices you can configure, simply you can define that microservices, register as a client, and all the endpoint need to validate in the authentication filter. If you go here in the filter, you need to configure all other microservices what you have in your project. Then if you'll go in the authentication filter, except these endpoint whatever you have defined in your validator, if you'll go here, except these endpoint, any other endpoint you'll try accessing from your API gateway must need to validate through this filter logic. It will check the authorization header, and then if it found the header, it will validate that token. So to give you the complete flow, what I will do, I will run in the debug mode and I will just navigate with the flow. So for now, let me stop this. I'll just add a breakpoint here to just verify request is landing to the filter. After this validation, if everything okay, request is going to the, let's say we'll try for the Sugi app. Okay, request is coming here. That is what I just want to show you. So this also I need to stop, and if I'll refresh, I have stopped 2 instances. See here, these are the down, right? It is not removed here, but it is showing down. So what I will do, I will start in the debug mode. Even in gateway, I will start in the debug mode. Okay. So it is up and running. Let's verify that both are up. Okay. So I need to generate the token again. So to access the token or to generate the token, I can hit this endpoint. This is not, I mean, this is allow, right? That is what we have defined in the route validator. Allow this particular endpoint. Don't ask for any credential. Otherwise, how user can get the token? I will hit this endpoint. It will talk to my identity service and will give me the result. What is that? Token. Okay. So I want a token. I got the token. Let me copy this token. Now I want to access the Sugi endpoint. Okay. So go to the authorization header. I need to remove this and then I need to paste the new one. Now I have ran in the debug mode. Now let me send the request. Can you see here? Request came to whom? I'll minimize this. Yeah. Request came to filter class, authentication filter. Okay. Then it will check the URL what user is trying is part of this. No, it came here. If the request contains the authorization as a header, this is what the key. Okay. If it contains, then pass it to the next. What is the next step? Get the authentication header. We are getting the authentication header. I'll show you. That is the reason I have did the substring of 7. If I'll show you, see here, barrier and there is a space. We need to remove the 7 index from this string. So that is the reason I have did the substring. Now if you will just check the auth header, after remove the 7 string index, we are getting the entire token. Now this validate token is there in my JWT util. If the validation is done, I will pass the breakpoint. Immediately request came to the Sugi app. This is another app, the microservices, and it will do the again REST call to the restaurant service and will fetch the result. Okay, it means the request what I am sending with the authentication token is being validated in the gateway. If it is succeed, then only request will redirect or route to the corresponding microservices. Okay, this is what we just understand. This flow will give you the complete picture of how you can implement the security in your microservices. Now if you understand this particular JWT implementation in microservices, you can configure 100 of microservices and you can play with this. Okay, and to be very honest, this is one of the common interview question you will get if you mention microservice in your resume. Okay, so practice well and try to understand the flow again and again until unless you understand it. Do let me know in a comment section if you have any doubts. That's all about this particular video, guys. Thanks for watching this video. Meet you soon with a new concept.